Welcome to Bestows from Bestows Brewhouse. This is a grain to glass video with my newest Modern West Coast IPA, and I can tell you it's delicious. This is some of the beers that I really love to brew. It's a Modern West Coast IPA, and what I mean by that is it's kind of a twist on a classic West Coast IPA, but there's no caramel malts in it. It's more hop driven than a West Coast normally is. It's bitter, it's still tropical and fruity from the hops, and the malt base is pretty clean. So this is actually a great beer. I'll run through the aroma and mouthfeel and everything in the end. So stick around until that. And first I'll go through the recipe. The ABV is 7.4, so it's quite strong, almost what I would call a deeper or a double IPA. What I aimed for with this beer was, some sweetness from the alcohol, of course, but some sweetness from the malts as well. So a little bit of honey sweetness from the malt, and then a lot of bitterness to back it up, 70 IBU, and then a lot of tropical aromas and flavors from the hops. So it has a quite heavy dry hop, also a whirlpool, and all the modern ways to brew an IPA. But if I start with the vitals, the original gravity is 10,065, so 1065 original gravity, and the final gravity is about 0.09, and that brings us to 7.4 in ABV. IBU is just about 70. Of course, you can find the recipe down in the description. And also I want to keep the color light, so the EBC is around 6 to 7 EBC. And I think it's just a beautiful beer as it is here. I've used gelatin to clear the beer, but it's not 100% clear. But I think it's beautiful this way. It's about almost 7 gallons. This recipe. There's a Brewfather link if you want to copy the recipe as well. So all the hops that I'm gonna mention is for almost 7 gallons or 29 liters. The base malt here is a pale ale, pale malt, and then I have that's 6 kilos of pale malt, 85%, and then about 7% carapils, carafoam, and also 7% dextrose or some kind of easy fermentable sugar, just to dry it out. I masked for 60 minutes. I could have gone shorter, but most of the time I actually mask between 45 minutes and 60 minutes, even though it's done, just because I have to clean my fermentation tank and stuff like that. It's only boiled for half an hour. So I have a 30-minute addition, 24 IBUs of Simcoe. This equals 25 grams. And then Idaho 7, 20 IBUs at 10 minutes. Also 11 IBUs of Simcoe at 10 minutes. And then I have a hop stand, just about 50 grams of each Citra and Idaho. 20-minute hop stand at 80 degrees Celsius. I'll write up here somewhere what that is in Fahrenheit. And then a quite heavy dry hop. That's about 130 grams of Idaho 7 for 5 days. 50 grams of Citra, 5 days. 40 grams of Simcoe, 5 days. So as you can actually hear from the dry hop, Idaho 7 is more of a tropical fruit than Citra. So I wanted the Citra to kind of stand in the background and let the tropical fruits really shine in this dry hop, and I think I really succeeded with that. And then for the minerals and the water treatment, what I wanted here was the hops to shine. So I actually have a 3:1 ratio of sulfate to chlorides. So that's about 150 parts per million sulfate and 50 parts per million chloride. That's the important thing about the minerals here. Then I used US05, the Chico strain, 3 packages of dry yeast, and then I let it ferment for 7 days at 19 degrees Celsius, and I ramped up the temperature to 23 degrees for 5 days for a diacetyl rest. So that's basically the recipe. It's pretty simple recipe. I dry hopped with magnets, so I kept all oxygen out of this, and I think it's so important not to let any oxygen in this after you pitch the yeast. It just ruins all the aromas, and if you're really unlucky, it will turn brown and kind of sickly sweet as well from the oxidation. So be really paranoid about letting oxygen in this beer. Yeah, basically that was my recipe. I used gelatin in the keg to clarify it. It's actually not cold crashed because my keezer is broken, so I've just put the kegs in a fridge at 6 degrees Celsius. So if I cold crash it, it would probably drop 100% clear. But right now I think it's still beautiful. Yeah, that was a recipe, and if you have any questions for that, write it down in the comments and I'll try to answer. Now I'm going for, just for aromas. So the first thing I get is actually kind of an orange or mandarin with a little passion fruit, mango. Yeah, really huge tropical aroma. It's really delicious. And I actually poured this beer 10 minutes ago, and you can see it still has a nice head. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful color, this kind of golden orange color. Just around those 7, maybe it might be a little bit darker than 7 EBC actually, but I think it's beautiful. It just looks amazing, and it smells so good. The mouthfeel of this beer is actually pretty thick, even for, I used dextrose to thin the beer out, but I have, I didn't use my RO filter in this actually. So there's a high amount of calcium in it than I usually have, and that actually, bumps up the mouthfeel a little bit, I think. But it's hard to make it really dry when it's such a big beer, and it doesn't suit it well actually. The sweetness of the beer is kind of in balance with the mouthfeel. This medium thick mouthfeel, I would call it. The carbonation level is right on target at 2.4, where I think it should be. And now for the flavors. I still get the mandarin and mango along with some citrusy notes, and along with sweetness from the beer as well, from the alcohol. And then in the end, the bitterness, it actually it cuts off the flavors with this grapefruit kind of bitterness. and the grapefruit lingers on a bit, and yeah, and leaves you thirsty for more. So I can and actually have been drinking this at some evenings when we had guests over. We drank this all night, so you won't get tired of it. You'll get a bit funny because it's pretty high in ABV, but yeah, it's really easy to drink. You can keep dunking it. Yeah, it's just a really good beer. I really recommend you to try this beer. I really like making my West Coast this way. I've made some with caramel malts before, but I like them also. But this is just kind of I think this is more fresh, it's more clean, and it's more hop forward than a typical West Coast, especially because of the huge dry hop and whirlpool. Yeah, and then I just love this bitterness that cuts off the flavors and just leaves you with this bitter, grapefruity kind of flavor. So I guess that was it. You should brew this. Find the recipe down in the description. If you have any questions for the recipe, write them down in the comments. Find me on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, if you want any tips for fermentation and stuff like that, I recommend you to watch the video that's up here somewhere. I'll go through all the details about the VDK rest, the acid rest, and the pitching rate, also temperatures and so on. So yeah, cheers, have a happy brewing out there.